Fear of failure in sports means that you are afraid of making mistakes. When you experience this fear, a lot of times you'll find yourself holding yourself back, so you're playing it safe. Because if you don't want to make mistakes, the easiest way to avoid making mistakes is to play it safe. Now, depending upon your sport, this playing it safe will look different. But for basketball and soccer players, a lot of times this is avoiding the ball, hesitating, not taking the ball to the basket, not trying to dribble the ball up the field in soccer, not making passes as crisp, so you start to second guess and hesitate passes, not taking shots. The same thing will be true in hockey. Now, with baseball and softball players, this might be you are overthinking at the plate. You are taking some off your throws when you're in the field or if you are pitching. But no matter what sport you play, when you are afraid of making mistakes, you will hold yourself back. You will play timidly, you will avoid, and you'll play it safe. Now, playing it safe is not the way for you to reach peak performance. So when we understand that the fear of failure is so hurtful, right? So we understand that this fear of failure is only going to hold you back. We need to then think, all right, how do we get you past this point of fear, managing this worry, managing this need to play it safe so that you can go out there and play freely? Well, there's this idea of being present, or the concept of mindfulness, that's really going to help you with managing this fear. So what I want to cover is the role that your attention, so your thinking, plays in the fear of failure, and then why mindfulness helps so much with managing fear of failure. And then at the end, I'm going to give you just a couple tips that you can use to be more mindful when you play. So when we look at the fear of failure, we need to think about it in terms of your attention, because the fear of failure is all mental, right? It's not about the actual mistake you make on the field. It's not even about the consequences of when you make that mistake. It's all about your attention in the moment and how that's leading to this fear. So whenever I'm talking about the fear of failure or sports performance anxiety, I always like to think in terms of a timeline. So over here on this side of the timeline, we see the past, and then in the middle, we see the present, and then over here, we see the future. Now, whenever you're experiencing a lot of fear or a lot of anxiety, where do you think your attention is on this timeline? It's either going to be in the past or it's going to be in the future. Now, a great example of this is a soccer player that I just began working with. Now, when I was on my first call with her, it was actually our intro call, so I was talking to her and I was talking to her mom at the same time. They were telling me about how when she's out there playing, she finds herself playing it safe. And this is happening now that she's been lowered to a lower team within her organization, but it was also the reason that she was lowered down to a lower team because she was playing it safe on her better team or the higher level team. Now, for her, when she was explaining to me why she was playing it safe, she was saying that she didn't want to make mistakes initially when she was on that higher level team because she didn't want to get moved down. But now that she's on this lower level team, she is afraid of making mistakes because she's putting pressure on herself to play perfectly, because she feels like playing perfectly is the only way she's going to get to that higher level. And her mom was telling me about how, they'll talk about what she's worried about, what's on her mind before games, and her mom pretty much said she's thinking about absolutely everything that could go wrong. If she's thinking about everything that could go wrong going into the game and everything that could go wrong during the game, where is her attention at that moment? Her attention is not in the present moment. It's on the future, right? So it's traveled to the future part of that timeline. So we're over here, we're in the future, because she is thinking about everything that could go wrong. Now, as she's over here thinking about everything that could go wrong, what do you think is going to happen? As she's thinking about that, she's going to want to start to control that future. This is where you find yourself feeling anxious, but also feeling afraid. You are afraid of what's going to happen, so naturally you start trying to control not having those negative consequences happen. For her, before it was getting lowered in the organization, now it's trying to avoid having her coaches think that she's not playing or that she's not a bad player. And so she's really trying to go out there and play her best, but she's stressing about it. So she's worrying about playing her best. Now, before, when she was on the higher level team and she didn't want to play poorly because she didn't want to get lowered down to a lower level, the way that she ended up trying to control not playing poorly was avoiding playing it safe. But unfortunately, playing it safe was the very reason that they lowered her in the organization, and playing it safe right now is currently the reason that she's feeling like she's not performing as well as she can. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. I just wanted to take a second to let you know of 2 free resources I have available for you. One is a free training on the top 5 mental mistakes athletes make, and the other one is for you if you are the parent of a young athlete, and it walks you through how to help your child develop mental toughness. Both trainings are linked in the description below. Now let's get back to the video. But if we go back to her attention, before games, her attention is on everything that could go wrong. Now, why do you think her attention is on everything that could go wrong? Well, because she's also thinking at that point back into the past about times where she has played poorly recently. So she's thinking about how she hasn't done well recently. And so then she shoots to the future, thinking about everything that could go wrong. And as she thinks about past mistakes, and as she has these future worries, what do you think happens to fear? Fear just starts growing and growing and growing and growing to the point where now she's out there playing not to make mistakes, playing scared, and playing it safe. So for yourself, if you are dealing with this fear of failure, think about that timeline. Before games, during games, after games, where is your attention? Are you thinking about the past, or are you thinking about the future? Most importantly, are you in the present moment? If you're not in the present moment, this shows us where this fear is coming from. You know, if you go into it and you think about everything that could go wrong, you think about the consequences that will happen if you do make mistakes, naturally fear is going to increase. And naturally as fear increases, fear surrounding this thing that we want to avoid, the natural response of your mind is to avoid. I mean, if we compare this to any other type of fear, right? It's the same type of fear happening in your brain that you feel when you're in the wild and you want to avoid a deadly predator or something. You're going to try to avoid it. You're going to keep yourself safe. The same reaction is happening in your mind. Unfortunately, when you try to avoid and play it safe, you only end up hurting yourself when you're out there on the field or court because you hold yourself back and you underperform. But when we look at this timeline and we understand that having our attention go into the future or having our attention stuck in the past on past mistakes, when we understand that that is what drives this fear, in the moment, that is what's driving this feeling to play it safe and to avoid. That shows us the power of being present. Because what's the opposite of being in the past or the future? What's going to be being in the present moment? And that's what mindfulness is. So mindfulness is the state of being completely in the present moment in terms of your attention and your awareness. So when we're talking about being in the past, present, or future, we're talking about attention, your thinking, what your mind focused on. Are you focused on everything that could go wrong in the future? Or are you focused on what you're doing right now in the present moment? If there's one overarching principle or idea that every single athlete tells me whenever it comes to them playing their best, it's being present. When they are present, when their minds are in the present moment, they're fully focused on what they're doing, that's when they play their best. When they're worried about what will happen, what has happened, that's where they experience more fear, more anxiety, and they underperform. Now, why is it that simply being present manages and reduces this fear? Well, because the fear that you are experiencing is fear in thought. It's fear in what will happen if this result doesn't go the way that I want it to. But I want you to think back to the last time that you experienced fear surrounding a consequence within your game. So let's say that, I'm going into a baseball game and I'm experiencing a lot of fear surrounding striking out. Once I strike out, am I afraid of striking out at that point? Or am I simply dealing with the frustrating emotions of striking out? At that point, I'm just dealing with the frustrating emotions until I start to become afraid of my next at-bat, right? And striking out my next at-bat. So for yourself, the last time you experienced that fear and then you had to face that consequence, in the moment when you experienced the consequence, so let's say you made the mistake or you did fail, were you afraid at that point or were you just taking action? All of this fear that you are experiencing is fear in thinking, fear in what will happen because of the past mistakes I've made, or what will happen in terms of performing poorly and then having a negative consequence occur as a result of performing poorly. It's all in your thinking. And when we look at the fear of failure and how this affects your play, remember the way that fear of failure negatively affects your play is by having this fear lead to avoidance and lead to playing it safe, playing timidly, and holding yourself back. That idea of playing it safe is based in this fear that's focused on the future and all these worries and the things that could go wrong. Once again, it's based in your thoughts being centered on the future. If we could bring your attention and bring your thoughts back into the present moment, as soon as you start to play more in a mindful state, more in the present moment, you're letting go of a lot of those worries. As soon as you let go of all those worries and all of those thoughts and all those fears, what do you think will happen to that desire to play it safe? You're not going to need to play safe as much anymore because you are freeing yourself to just simply play in the moment. You know, as athletes, it's really easy to be your own worst enemy, right? It's really easy to hold yourself back. And a lot of times when I'm working one-on-one with athletes and one-on-one coaching, I talk to them about how the mental game is largely about getting your mind out of the way, right? Just getting your mind out of the way so you can simply play. The ideal state to be in as an athlete is completely in the present moment. You're not really thinking about what could happen, what has happened. You're just there, you're just doing, you're just flowing, right? That's the flow state. You cannot be in the flow state while you're simultaneously overthinking the future or overthinking the past. So as a mental performance coach, I work with athletes on getting them to just be present. Just let go of all these worries, let go of all these fears, and focus in the moment. Now, a lot of times we do that by thinking because unfortunately, we can't just turn your brain off, right, and turn your thinking off, but we can simplify your thinking to a point where it's much easier to be present. And that is what I want to talk to you about in terms of becoming more mindful. So once again, this idea of being mindful means that you are completely in the present moment with your attention. When you are in the present moment with your attention, you're no longer thinking about the past or the future as much, which means you are no longer experiencing as much fear of what might happen. So now, how can you be more mindful? Well, mindfulness is a skill. And so we need to look at this skill just like any physical skill that you have within your game. So if you have if you have a physical skill you want to improve, like your shot, for example, what would you do? Well, you would take your shot, you'd probably film yourself, and then you would break it down and you would think, what do I specifically need to work on? And then you would identify some drills that you want to do. And then you would get to work, right, on going through those drills, working on some exercises, and day by day, your shooting would improve. We're taking the same approach with this mindfulness, where we want to see mindfulness as a skill we want to build, right, a skill we want to improve. But we are also taking more of a short-term approach because we know that mindfulness is a state you want to be in for your next game. So I want us to start with this long-term approach because this long-term approach is something that you want to be putting into practice as soon as possible so that next month, next season, next year, you're that much more skilled in the ability to play in a mindful state. And remember, playing in a mindful state means you're playing with less fear. The way that you train mindfulness over the long term is through mindfulness exercises like the mindfulness meditation. You could also use a mindful walk or a mindful jog, which is a fantastic exercise where, you just simply go for a walk for 10 to 20 minutes, let's say, and you focus on your breathing while you're going for that walk. Mindfulness meditation is very similar, but instead of going for a walk, you just sit down, you close your eyes, and you focus on your breathing for about 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever the time frame is that you feel the most comfortable with. But the idea behind long-term mindfulness training is that we see mindfulness as the state of being present, but then we see the skill of being able to retain your attention in the present moment as something we need to train. So whether you're doing mindfulness meditation or a mindful walk or practicing any other mindfulness training exercise, the same principle applies. And the principle is try to focus in the present moment by focusing on your breathing or focusing on the sensation of walking, whatever it might be in the present moment. But I found focusing on your breathing to be the easiest. So you want to try to focus on the breathing. But then we recognize that being mindful, being present is so hard. It's incredibly difficult. And what's going to happen is you're going to have your attention drift onto different thoughts. If you're walking, you're going to start looking at things. You're going to see things that distract you, whatever it might be. But as soon as you notice your attention drifting, you just want to bring it back onto your breath. Because during a game, especially if we are using this mindfulness to manage the fear of failure, you need to be able to recognize during games when your attention has traveled into the future, into the past, and you need to bring it back into the present moment. That's what you're working to train long-term with this mindfulness exercise. Now, in addition to training mindfulness long-term, like I said, you also want to have some tools or a little bit of a tip in place to where you can be more mindful for your next competition. The first one is just focusing on your breathing. Once again, I know it's super simple, but here's the truth. When you're out there performing, what did I say our goal is from a mental game standpoint? Our goal is to take your mind out of the equation, right? Get yourself out of your own way so you can just simply play. Now, how do you get yourself out of your own way? You simplify your thinking. You have to trust your physical skills. Your skills are as good as they're going to be that day. So you just absolutely have to go out there, trust your skills. The way you trust your skills is you don't overthink. That's why you just want to focus on your breathing. And to do this and to make it more of an actionable exercise for you, you can use count breathing where you breathe in for a certain number. So let's say you breathe in for a count of 4 and then you breathe out for a count of 4, or you breathe in for a count of 4 and out for a count of 8. But you just want to focus on your breathing. Because just like with the mindfulness training exercises, when you focus on your breath, you are present. And focusing on your breathing also has an added benefit of when you take nice deep breaths when you play, it's going to calm your mind down and it's going to help you relax. And I don't know if you've ever heard this from a coach, but I had a coach that always told me that a relaxed hitter is a dangerous hitter. So the calmer that your mind can be, the more relaxed your muscles can be, the more likely you are to be quick, to be effective out there when you are playing. Now, the other tip for being mindful during a game is to set objectives for yourselves. So what an objective is it's a process goal that is controllable. So going back to that soccer player example, she's focused on everything that could go wrong. So a process goal for her might be to focus on giving full effort, just to change that goal that she has in a game. Instead of being trying to avoid all of these mistakes, she would focus on just giving full effort. Another goal that she might set, or an objective she might set, is to call for the ball because that's going to get her involved a little bit more. All you want to do with the objective part is to think, what am I not doing right now that if I did would help me play better, but that what am I not doing thing needs to be controllable. So if you're not scoring a lot of points, don't say that my objective is to score a lot of points, because that's not 100% within your control. But if you find yourself playing with fear and you're holding yourself back, are you not taking as many shots? Are you not driving to the basket? So then maybe your objective would be to play aggressive, attack the basket. If you're not playing good defense, if you're being timid on defense, maybe your objective is to pressure the ball. The idea behind objectives is give yourself something controllable that's part of the process that will keep your attention in the present moment. Because remember, in summary, being present is going to help you manage this fear, because fear of failure is all about your attention. Your attention is in the future, worrying about what could go wrong. Your attention is in the past, thinking about what has gone wrong. We need to bring you into the present moment. And mindfulness is the state of being present. So you want to set objectives and focus on your breathing to be more mindful, be more present, and just allow yourself to perform. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I put out new videos each week on sports psychology and mental training. And if you have any questions about this video or would like me to cover any other sports psychology topic, please let me know in the comments below.